thanks to the organisers, as usual, for giving Caspin the opportunity to speak and arranging such a high-calibre range of speakers on the what is sometimes known as the graveyard shift in this conference. Although you wouldn't call it that, Jerry. No. Anyway, moving on. Okay, so actually, contrary to what the introduction said, we're actually not going to focus too much on some of the what's going to happen in 2022 for the company, including the Mount Squires project. We're going to focus more on what's happening in the short term, which I think is probably more relevant for investors to focus on. So the usual corporate snapshot slide. This slide actually, apart from the share graph, probably hasn't changed much from this conference last year. Now, what that actually means in sort of more simple terms is this, and this is what a Caspin share gives you. It gives you a pretty well-recognised team. Jerry, I'm just going to turn this around so that I don't have to keep looking at the screen. The team, pretty reasonably high calibre kind of team where we pride ourselves on doing good technical work, so we've got plenty of good capable people at board and management level, but across the board we've actually got a diverse range of experience. So that's probably the first fundamental to exploration success, and then secondly is obviously having great shareholder support, and we were probably one of the best floats of 2020. We've also raised money again last year, and continued support from a couple of our major shareholders. And you'd recognise obviously the Chalice logo. They're our major and our largest shareholder on the register. We've got a great relationship with Chalice. That's obviously a strategic relationship, which if you're not familiar with the Caspin story, you'll recognise shortly. But also Tinci Materials, which are a chemical company based in mainland China. They've got quite a broad business, which includes a bit of a diversification into battery precursor materials. So quite a very large company. They're listed on the Shenzhen exchange. I think they're worth about $15 billion US. And then thirdly, having the right projects in the right region. For us right at the moment, it's all about the Yarrawinda Brook project, which is what we're going to talk about, and then bringing that all in together. We are an active explorer, so you know that when you buy a share in Caspin, your money is going to work. So the two projects, Yarrawinda Brook, the focus of this talk, but not to sort of pass on the Mount Squires project. That's something that, look, if I was going to look back on 2021, it was a great year, except for the fact we probably didn't do as much work out there as what we would have liked. The West Musgrave is a really interesting place, and I'm hoping that Oz Minerals, who are talking in this block later this afternoon, will be talking up the West Musgrave project, because it's really exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing the results from that, and that will, I think, open up the entire West Musgrave region, and we're well placed there with both sort of copper gold and nickel copper sort of potential there as well. So the Yarrawinda Brook project, for those that aren't familiar, just up the road from Chalice Mining's Julimar project. It's about an hour and 20 from my doorstep to the centre of the project, so very conveniently located. Caspin's got a reasonably large land holding, smack bang in the middle of what is probably the most exciting nickel copper province in Australia at the current juncture. Now, what's I guess probably in most people's minds at the moment is the results from a drill hole that we released last week. That was at what we call the XC22 prospect. That's a photo of the land there on the right-hand side, and you can see the drill rig sort of parked off on the tree line. Most of our work to date had been focused more on this sort of what we call the central Yarrawinda Hill area, which is the hill in the background. But this XC22 is a geophysical anomaly that had sort of we'd been toying with for some time, and drilled a hole late last year, which we announced the visuals for in November, and then put out the results last week. And you can see that we got two really interesting sort of results there from a nickel copper perspective and from a PGE kind of point of view as well. And that's what we'll sort of explain why that has got us excited. And just for a bit of background on how this sort of target came about, XC22 is a slightly different sort of beast to some of our other targets at Yarrabrook Hill. Gravity survey was the real changer for us, and it allowed us to map the intrusion much better than just using magnetics by itself. And I guess what we found, what interested us was that this area was a mag high but a gravity low. And for those of you that have been following the Chalice story, you'd recognise that Gonaville itself is that sort of has that sort of geophysical characteristic. And so that was kind of interesting. And then there was also this airborne EM anomaly that sits over the top of it as well, which is where the XC22 name comes from. It was quite large, but we were a bit concerned that it might have been a false positive. The soil geochem was a bit mixed. There's obviously plenty of palladium kicking around the soil, nickel and copper. So it was a little bit enigmatic, and look, we just had to drill it. And that's, at the end of the day, drill brit tells the story. And so that's just zooming in on the anomaly itself. We plonked hole 22 right in the middle of it, and 46 metres down, 2 metres of semi-massive of sulphide. We could see the chalcopyrite in it. We just needed the assays to confirm the nickel results, and sure enough, 2 metres at 1.5% nickel and a bit of copper and a bit of palladium and platinum kicking in there as well. Fantastic. It's not a world-beating sort of assay result, but given the context of the size of that anomaly, the relatively shallow dip, the fact that it's open in pretty much every direction, and you can see there's a thrust plane there that is a contact between the mafic package and an overlying granite. A lot of that EM response might actually be masked by the granite. But that, to be honest, actually isn't the real story. The real story for me is the lower PGE zone that sort of came as somewhat of a surprise, because it's not, to look at, it wasn't anything particularly special. It's more of a disseminated style of mineralisation, very low sulphide, only probably 1 to 2% at most. So I guess it's probably what we'd consider high tenor. But the assays came back there with a 13 metre zone with combined about 1 gram per tonne 3E. So that's platinum, palladium and gold all adding up together, with a bit of nickel and a bit of copper. Now, for those that aren't that versed in these sort of systems, that doesn't sound like a lot, but again, and apologies for having to keep referring to the Chalice presentation here, but if you'd seen that, you would have noticed that Chalice's global resource grade is about that number. So for us, that is actually the first intercept where we've got something that is probably at resource grade, in today's numbers. So, we can't talk in equivalents or anything like that, but that sort of grade is actually starting to get on the economic side. But I guess probably what's just as important is that it's starting to fit the geological model there. So this mineralisation occurs at a contact between this sort of lower peridotite unit and the mafic unit above it, and probably there's a bit of magma mixing on that contact. And you can see there, up dip, so there's the YBR series of holes. They're holes that go back into the 1980s. So it's a legacy data. And they were only ever assayed for PGE, so we don't really know if there was any nickel or copper associated with it. So, which, to be perfectly honest with you, we don't even consider those holes effective. But that resulting YARC22 does correlate really nicely with that historical work. So, and I guess that's what really gets us excited. And then let's look at it in plan, and this is where things start to get really interesting. So we've got the airborne EM anomaly outlined in purple there over a magnetic image. And so the airborne EM anomaly, we're pretty confident is mapping that sulphide that we saw about 40 metres downhole. But the mag image, you'll see, is much broader, and that's associated with the peridotite, that lower ultramafic unit. Now, we've thrown a few extra sort of historical results on there, and you can see that those historical PGE results holes that, we don't necessarily consider effective, but are a reasonable sort of guide in terms of where our exploration should be heading, are not necessarily associated with that airborne EM anomaly. They're associated with a mag anomaly. So we think that's mapping that same zone of mineralisation along that ultramafic contact. And that's a large area. That's over a kilometre along strike and open down dip. And you can sort of see that mag feature probably does continue down dip. The mag kind of gets a bit fuzzy, which is the influence of the granite masking that ultramafic. So that is what's really got us excited. And that's going to be the focus, I guess, for exploration in the short term. Now, that's not to say that it's our only, we're not a one-trick pony. We're not putting everything on black. We've still got a number of other targets. This area is still at an early stage of exploration, and we're still waiting for some of our results from last year to come back, which is all the black dots you can see on that. This is our best attempt so far at demonstrating what is effective drilling in the Yarrabrook Hill area. Lots of gaps, and in fact, there's geochem anomalies there without a single drill hole. So, and this is just a bit of an example of what the central Yarrabrook Hill area looks like. Very large thicknesses of anomalism. What we're really trying to look for here is a sweet spot, and we're kind of open-minded about what that sweet spot is. We're still working on a massive sulphide kind of model, as well as narrow vein-like. Some people refer to Marinsky Reef, the South African sort of style of mineralisation, as a possibility. But anywhere where you can get sort of concentration of these PGEs is basically what we're looking for, and it could just be a change in geometry of the intrusion. So there's a number of different possibilities. It's a complex area, but and I guess we're still on a pretty steep learning curve. But I think the picture is starting to fall out, and we've got a lot of confidence in our exploration going forward. So this is what you get here with Caspin at the moment. We've just given the market our best result to date. We've already demonstrated that the area's prospective, but now we're starting to get into something that's starting to look real. And the analogue is Chalice's Julimar project, or Gonaville deposit, and this is what we're starting to see a lot of similarities. And more importantly, we're active, and so drilling will start again by the end of the month. 2 rigs, RC and a diamond rig, continuing pretty much where we left off last year. There was unfortunately, a lot of our drilling conditions were quite difficult, and we weren't able to complete all the holes as deep as we'd like. So, a diamond rig will come in and finish off some of those holes with diamond tails. And I guess, what we see ourselves as being probably the most advanced exploration play in the West Yilgarn, behind what Chalice are doing as well. So that's Caspin. That's probably the short-term Caspin. There's a lot more to Caspin. We haven't talked about, we've talked about probably the Yarrabrook Hill area is a small part of the Yarrawinda Brook project itself. So we're developing a bit of a pipeline of prospects. All we're talking about today is the most advanced, but there's still a lot of other things that we're building up that are still in the early stages of understanding, and you will continue to work them up. And then, of course, there's the Mount Squires project, and hopefully we'll be out there in the middle of the year on the ground, and that'll be the catalyst to talk to you about the exciting things that are going on out there. Experienced team, well funded in the right commodities, and I think, Jerry, that pretty much sums up the opportunity with Caspin.